dog poop can definitely be composted, but it needs to be done properly because the temperature within the compost needs to reach a certain level to make sure that all of these nasty bugs that can potentially cause problems are actually killed. And so when that compost is then used, it's not going to cause problems. But there are also caveats on where that compost should be used. Dog poop, there's mountains of the stuff produced every day, and it actually can have quite a big environmental impact. So today I want to talk about how to get rid of that poop.
Welcome to Call the Vet, the show that answers all your dog and cat questions so they can live healthier, happier lives. And here's your host, veterinarian Dr. Alex Avery.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 54 of the Call the Vet podcast. I'm Dr. Alex, and if we've not met before, then I'm the veterinarian behind ourpetshealth.com, and my aim is to help you and your pet live a healthier, happier life, no matter what life throws their way. And today I'm answering a question all about how to get rid of your dog's waste. One of my questions is about a Great Dane's waste, so you can only imagine how numerous and how voluminous that problem is. But before I get into that, if you're not already subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button on whichever podcasting app you're listening to so you don't miss out on any future episode. And you can also submit your question over at callthevet.org. So whichever question you have, whether it's a pressing problem that's been bugging you for years, or whether it's something that you've just recently come across with your dog or your cat, head over to callthevet.org and submit your question today. And so with that out of the way, let's get into today's episode. So I've had two separate questions that are very closely linked. So the first one was from Karen, who wrote that I recently read that flushing dog poop was a good way to spread cryptosporidium since water is not treated for crypto that can cause painful diarrhea in humans. Have you verified that water waste companies that it's okay to flush dog poop? I was just wondering because I'm trying to find a green way to get rid of my Great Dane's giant and numerous poops. And then Lynn wrote in to say, I've read that dog waste contains elements that are not broken down in waste treatment plants. Have you checked this since you recommend flushing? Because of this, dog feces should not be flushed or composted. Neighbours toss it over the back wooded hill every day adjacent to my property, an open compost. So that was from Lynn. Now, I imagine both of these questions are in response to my blog post, which is the green ways to dispose of your dog's poop. And they bring a number of valid points. Certainly, I do talk about flushing. I do talk about composting. In both of those, there are big caveats, though, and absolutely, I do suggest that everybody, if they're thinking of flushing their dog's poop, should check with your local waste or water company to make sure that they are able to break down everything. So that is including cryptosporidium, but there's a number of things that they may not be able to process and that may cause problems with your local community's waste disposal and water processing plant. So definitely check that out. And when it comes to composting, well, absolutely, dog poop can definitely be composted, but it needs to be done properly because the temperature within the compost needs to reach a certain level to make sure that all of these nasty bugs that can potentially cause problems are actually killed. And so when that compost is then used, it's not going to cause problems. But there are also caveats on where that compost should be used, which I'll come on to in a little bit of a minute. But you know, you might be thinking, well, that's all very well and good, but why should I care? What's the problem? Well, I've got loads of information over in a link in the show notes, so I'll leave that here if there is something that you want to dive into in a deeper level. But really, there is a dog poop mountain out there. So there's over about 96 million dogs in the US, the UK and Australia alone. So just imagine how many other dogs there are kind of across the world as a whole. And of these dogs, the 96 million, they produce about 12 million tons of dog poop every year. So that's a huge amount. Now, that in itself has an environmental impact. If it's going into landfill, then methane is produced, which is a really potent greenhouse gas. But as well as that greenhouse effect, if we actually assume that every dog goes about once a day, then in clearing up after your dog, and absolutely we should all be cleaning up after our dog goes to the toilet, then every month 2,900 million plastic bags are going to be used just to dispose of dog waste. So that is also a huge problem at a time when we really should be trying to cut down on the amount of plastic that we're using. And so that brings me to the 7 ways that you can dispose of your dog's waste. So the first one, as we've already suggested, it's just in the regular trash that goes into the landfill. But there really are the 2 major issues with that. So the first one is that actually the plastic bag, it's not going to break down. It's then going to, kind of get eroded, and it's potentially going to end up in waterways and in the sea and cause microplastics, which causes all kinds of problems and potential problems that we're likely not even aware of at the moment. And even those that are marked biodegradable or are non-petroleum, non-plastic based, they don't really break down in a landfill either, because the way that they're designed to break down is in an oxygen-rich environment where there's lots of moisture. And so, it's maybe not as green as you might expect. What will happen if it's a non-petroleum based one, then just like the dog poop, in that anaerobic environment, there's not a lot of oxygen there, methane is going to be produced. And as I've already said, that's a really potent greenhouse gas, which is definitely has a big impact on climate change. So, that's the regular trash, and that's probably what most people are doing. The next option is to flush it down the toilet. So you can empty the poop bag into the toilet and then flush it. The bag is still going to be a problem, but we're not going to get that methane production. If you're collecting your dog's poop in your yard as well, then you don't need to use a bag. You could collect it in a scoop and get it to the toilet that way. You can also get flushable dog poop bags, which are able to break down in the water and not cause this microplastic problem. And it means that, it's a little bit cleaner of a way for you to manage and to collect the poop. But as I said at the beginning, if you're planning on doing this, then you need to check with your local authority, with your council, with your region, check that they are able to process both the bag and the dog waste, because you don't want to clog up the system and you don't want to cause problems with how that's being processed. Also, if you've got really old plumbing in your house, then it might be that that's not going to be able to cope with the flushable dog poop bags as well. So that's another thing to consider. Next, Doggy septic tank. So you can dig a hole, you can fit a little kind of plastic system. I mean, you can really just dig a hole and cover it up. And then you use enzymes and water every time you put your dog's waste down there. That then gets break down and it gets drained out into the soil and gets rid that way. It's not going to work if it gets too cold. You need free draining soil. So there are some areas in some parts of the world where that's not going to be appropriate. But, that's another option there. Burying it is the 4th option to get rid of your dog's waste. So it needs to be around 6 to 12 inches deep, ideally warm, moist soil. It's going to take as little as 2 weeks' time for that waste to decompose. But again, in dry or in cold conditions, it might take much, much longer. Composting is next. So composting, we've often got a pile of lawn clippings maybe at the bottom of your garden, a few sticks and kind of things that you clear up when you prune your hedges and things like that once a year. Now that compost is probably not going to be good enough. So we really need to compost properly and make sure that the temperature is getting up to what it needs to be, and that key temperature is 165 degrees, so that's pretty hot, and that needs to be at that temperature for 5 days to destroy all of the bugs and potential nasties within your dog's waste. There are definitely ways that you can do that, and I've got links in the show notes to composting systems that will get up to that temperature, and that you don't need to be overly concerned about the things not being broken down. But it does take a little bit of work, and it does take a little bit of thought. You can't just add these things to a pile and hope that it will happen. You should also avoid using that compost on any edible products, and obviously wash your hands well after you've handled it, or you've been in the beds, the flower beds, for example, where you are using that compost, just in case it hasn't got up to temperature and there are some bugs there. A wormery is the next thing you can do. So think of this like a compost heap plus. So the worms just act an awful lot faster to break everything down. It's very effective and it's really quick, and it produces a great usable material as well, which is clearly another benefit of this system. But again, you don't want to use it on any edible product. So this is not for the veggie garden. And then finally, a biogas system. So there are actually proposed schemes where the methane that I talked about before, when everything's being broken down in an anaerobic environment, if we can actually collect that methane, we can use that to power things like streetlights. And there are some schemes that have been proposed to do just that. They're not up and running yet, certainly to my knowledge they're not. If you know that there are, then let me know. I'd love to hear about it. But that's definitely something to watch this space. So, I hope that answers Karen and Lynn's question. There are definitely some caveats to flushing your dog's poop down the toilet or using a composter. They're definitely things that you can consider with a little bit of thought and maybe with a little bit of research, because that's going to vary depending on your area. But this is a problem that everyone who has a dog should think about. Is there more that they can be doing to reduce their plastic use, to reduce the risk of microplastics, to reduce methane production, so that your dog and the way your dog lives can be as green as possible?
Get your questions answered at callthevet.org.
So if you'd like more information about any of those topics, if you're wondering what a Doggy septic tank looks like or where you can buy one, any other accessories or some more information about composting, for example, then make sure you head over to the show notes where there's all the information and all the links you need there. Also, I just wanted to talk about the Our Pets Health Academy quickly before I go. So that is actually in its beta launch week now, so that's only going to be open for a few more days. So if you're interested in joining a community that is all about optimizing your pet's health, keeping them as healthy as possible, providing support and interacting with fellow pet lovers, then head over to ourpetshealthacademy.com today and you should get your hands on that never to be repeated beta launch offer. I hope you'll join me over there. And until next week, I'm Dr. Alex. This is the Call the Vet Show. Take care.
You've been listening to Call the Vet. Be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode of the show that answers all of your pet questions.